Okay, so now what we're going to do is to import the CSV file into Unreal Engine and also create a data actor so that the other actors in our world can refer to it to access the data and do some stuff. Okay, so let's do it. So let's start by importing a file. So I have a very simple CSV file here. And here we have just two columns and two rows. So the first one is the name, which is pretty much a metadata. And then we have what I call my movement, which is the only variable that we have. And then this row is called data with only one value, which is 200. So each of the member variables of our struct will correspond to each of the columns of our CSV file. So we only have one column, which is my movement, and one row, which is data that we will access. Okay, so if I click here, just create one folder, call it data, and then I'll place my file here by clicking on import. So here we have import as a data table, and then I have to choose row type, and will be exactly the struct that we created. So the row type will be of a data struct type. I'll just click OK. And if I open the file, it will give me exactly the table that I had. Okay, so now that we have imported the file, what we need to do is to create a data actor. So for this, just go back here into the engine. We're going to add new C++ class. It'll be type actor, and I'll call it my data actor. Okay, so here in my data actor header file, what I'll need to do is first include a object for my data struct pointer object. I'll call it my data row. So I will use this to store each row of my data file, and I have to include here as well. And I also want to include a DataTable object so that I can attach my data table to this object in a real engine. So data table, the pointer, I call it my data table. And I will expose it using U property. I'll call it my data table. So with this, we can refer our data table file that we just imported to this object and its blueprint. And I also want to include a getter for my movement. And this will return my movement variable, the 200 value that is in the file. Okay, and in my implementation file, I want to first, I'm just gonna take to false because I don't need to use it on every tick. And then I want to include a finder function for us to fetch the data from my data file. So I am going to use my data table object, and I will call find row. I will pass the type of data struct that I'm using, which is my data struct. The name of the row is data. and it needs a context string, which I will create. Okay, and then I will pass this value into my data row that I just created. Okay, and now I need to define my getter function, and this will return my data row, and from this I will fetch the column my movement, which is the memory variable for my object. Let me compile and save. Oops. This is not a function, so it doesn't require parentheses here. Okay, there we go. Now we'll compile and save. And inside Unreal, all we need to do is to create a blueprint based on my data actor. I'll call it BP, my data actor, inside this data folder. Okay, so here we have my data table, the variable that we exposed to the blueprint, and then I select my data table file. So there we have it. We made the connection between the data table file, the CSV file, with my data table object that I created. And what I need to do is simply to include this object in my world. And now we need to make the other actors.